The salt spray isn't just ocean water. For countless women throughout the long, harsh centuries of the Viking Age, it tasted like fear, a bitter and metallic promise of a nightmare that was still to come, but was now undeniably inevitable. The Viking Age, a period often pictured in our modern minds as a glorious time of brave exploration, daring voyages, and fierce, honorable warriors with shining axes, hid a much darker and more chilling truth beneath its veneer of adventure. It was an era of immense, brutal exploitation, an entire society built not just on bold trade routes and hard-won conquest, but tragically and undeniably on human bodies. This is the story of Viking Lust. It reveals the dark and often unspoken trade in human lives that not only powered an empire, but also stained its very foundations. This is a story written in the cold, unyielding iron of chains, a narrative etched deeply into the silent suffering of countless women, men, and children. It was an empire built brick by brick, or perhaps more accurately, woman by woman and chain by chain. We are about to strip away the romanticized myths and confront the raw, unvarnished reality of a past that has been hidden for far too long. Before we dive deeper into these forgotten stories of survival, suffering, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit, I need your help. Please help me reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers. Your unwavering support is absolutely crucial. It's what makes it possible for me to keep exposing history's darkest secrets and uncover truths that have been deliberately hidden or simply forgotten for far too long. Hit that subscribe button right now, and while you're at it, please give this video a thumbs up. Your engagement means the world to this channel and helps these vital stories reach a wider audience. Imagine, if you will, that you are a young woman living a simple life, perhaps only 17 years old, full of the innocent hopes and dreams that every young person holds. One moment you are going about your daily chores in your small, humble Irish home, perhaps spinning wool or tending to a small garden, the familiar sounds of your village, a comforting backdrop to your peaceful existence. The next moment, that peace is violently shattered. A sudden piercing scream pierces the air, followed by another, and then many more, echoing with terror. Smoke, thick and acrid, begins to curl over the thatched roofs, and the smell of burning timber and fear fills your lungs, choking you. The chaos is absolute, deafening, and utterly disorienting. Rough, calloused hands, reeking of salt and sweat, grab you from behind, tearing you away from everything you know. Your world, once so stable and predictable, shatters in an instant, fragments of your former life scattering like dust in the wind. You are powerless, helpless, and utterly terrified. You are dragged, struggling futilely, through the burning village, past scenes of unspeakable violence and despair, onto the rough, splintered deck of a Viking longship. The wooden planks are cold, unyielding, and alien beneath your bare, trembling feet. The terrifying sounds of your burning home, your screaming neighbors, and the distant cries of your family slowly, agonizingly fade behind you. The longship, a sleek, predatory silhouette against the dawn sky, pushes out from the familiar coastline into the vast, unknown, and terrifying sea. The rhythmic dip of the oars is like a drumbeat, marking the beginning of your journey into a living nightmare. You look back, one last time, your heart a raw wound, as your past slips away into the mist, gone forever. The Viking Age, a period that captivated historians and romantics alike, undeniably brought with it bold and intrepid explorers who sailed their magnificent longships to distant, uncharted lands, forever changing the map of the known world. It also brought fierce and formidable warriors whose reputation alone was enough to strike chilling fear into the hearts of their enemies across continents. They were master shipbuilders, skilled navigators, and cunning strategists. But behind these famous, often heroic images, behind the sagas and the legends, lay a brutal and deeply uncomfortable secret: a massive, cruel, and deeply integrated trade in human lives. This wasn't just an incidental consequence of their raids, it was a deliberate, calculated, and essential component of their society. This horrific human trade was not merely a small side business, confined to a few bad actors operating on the fringes of society. On the contrary, it was a key foundation of Viking power, its immense wealth and its expansive reach. The entire societal structure, from the lowest, most humble farmer struggling to eke out a living in the harsh northern lands, to the highest, most revered chief presiding over vast territories, was touched, funded, or directly participated in this dark, dehumanizing system. Slavery wasn't an anomaly, it was the norm. It permeated every aspect of their existence, influencing their economy, their social hierarchy, and their very understanding of prosperity. Viking raids, far from being random acts of chaotic violence or spontaneous outbursts of aggression, were often carefully planned business ventures calculated with cold precision. Rich leaders, powerful jarls, and wealthy merchants often funded these expeditions, acting as investors. They poured their precious gold, silver, and resources into outfitting ships, arming crews, and supplying provisions, all with the clear expectation of a significant, profitable return on their investment. These ventures were not just about plunder, they were about securing a specific, highly valuable commodity, and the most profitable return, more valuable and more consistently available than mere silver, precious furs, or exotic goods, was often human cargo. The men, women, and children captured during these devastating raids were not just victims. They were immediately seen as wealth, as tangible property to be bought, sold, and traded. They were quite literally a form of currency, a living, breathing commodity fueling the growth, expansion, and opulence of the entire Viking world. Their bodies were the bedrock upon which the Viking economy was built, a silent testament to the empire's true cost. The Vikings' famous longships, marvels of engineering for their time, were not solely designed for war or daring exploration, though they excelled at both. Their ingenious design made them perfect for this cruel and extensive trade in human beings. With their remarkably shallow bottoms, these versatile ships could sail not only across vast, treacherous open seas, braving the fiercest storms, but also deep inland, navigating winding rivers and shallow waterways. This allowed them to penetrate unexpected territories, reaching far beyond the traditional coastal defenses. They were instruments of both conquest and commerce, specifically adapted for the brutal efficiency of the slave trade. This unique design allowed them to bypass traditional, often heavily fortified defenses that guarded coastlines and river mouths. They could strike swiftly, often silently, appearing almost out of nowhere, deep into the heart of communities that believed themselves to be safe, nestled far from the sea. They targeted soft spots, vulnerable settlements, isolated farms, and unfortified villages where people were less able to defend themselves against such a sudden, and overwhelming onslaught. The element of surprise was their most potent weapon, turning peaceful communities into scenes of unimaginable terror in mere moments. Monasteries, often rich in treasures accumulated over centuries, were particularly easy and attractive targets. These centers of learning and worship held not only gold, silver, and valuable manuscripts, but also, crucially, people, especially women. Nuns, scholars, and local villagers, seeking refuge within their walls, became prime targets. Entire communities could vanish overnight, their populations taken by force, their lives irrevocably altered. The spiritual havens became hunting grounds, and their inhabitants became chattel, stripped of their freedom and their sacred vows. Once captured, a person's life changed forever, irrevocably and tragically. Women lost their cherished names, their beloved families, their homes, and every single piece of their former identity. They were stripped of their dignity, their autonomy, and their very sense of self. They became thralls, which was the stark, unfeeling Norse word for slave. It was a word that encapsulated their new, terrifying reality. They were no longer recognized as human beings, but as mere possessions. In the cold, calculating eyes of Viking law and society, a thrall was not considered a person. They were seen as property, no different in legal standing from an animal in a field or a tool in a workshop. They were objects, entirely devoid of rights, autonomy, or personal will. They could be used as their owner pleased, bought, sold, given away, or even killed by their masters without consequence or legal repercussions. This total and absolute dehumanization was not a side effect of the system. It was a key, fundamental part of its design, enabling the brutal exploitation that followed. It made the unimaginable acceptable. The journey on the longships was an experience of pure, unadulterated terror and unimaginable suffering. Captives were often bound, their hands and feet secured with ropes and crammed together in the open boats, exposed without mercy to the harsh, unforgiving elements. They faced weeks, sometimes even months, of freezing seas that lashed at them constantly, biting winds that cut through their meager clothing, and relentless, stinging salt spray that stung their eyes and chafed their skin. Every wave, every gust of wind was a fresh torment. Food and water were agonizingly scarce, just enough, if they were lucky, to keep them alive for the eventual sail. There was no compassion, only cold calculation. Many did not survive the brutal voyage, succumbing to the relentless cold, the gnawing hunger, or the inevitable diseases that spread rapidly through the cramped, unsanitary conditions. Their bodies, stripped of life and value, were simply tossed overboard, unceremoniously swallowed by the vast, indifferent ocean, leaving no trace behind, save for the chilling memory in the hearts of those still living. But for those who did survive the harrowing sea passage, those who clung to life through sheer will or stubborn chance, an even greater horror often awaited them. The ordeal of the journey, as brutal as it was only the beginning of a lifetime of servitude, ceaseless labor, and profound suffering. Their arrival signaled not an end to their torment, but merely a new, bleak chapter in their stolen lives. The true horror of their existence as thralls was about to begin, an endless cycle of degradation and toil. Upon arrival, major cities across the Viking world transformed into massive, bustling slave markets, centers of this macabre human trade. Dublin, in Ireland, for example, became one of the largest and most notorious hubs for this dark commerce. From here, countless captured women, men, and children were sold, branded, and sent across the entire known Viking world, throughout Scandinavia, to the newly settled lands of Iceland, and far beyond, to the distant reaches of their expansive trade network. These markets were not just places of commerce, they were scenes of utter despair, where human lives were decided in moments, with a glance, a touch, and the clink of coins. The Viking trade network stretched for thousands of miles, a vast spiderweb of routes connecting diverse cultures and distant lands. It reached from the western shores of Ireland, where countless lives were snatched away, all the way deep into the east, touching the great, glittering empires of Byzantium and the wealthy, sophisticated Arab world. These sprawling markets, whether in Northern Europe or the Middle East, were busy, cruel places, filled with the cries of merchants and the silent terror of the enslaved. Futures were bought and sold, families were torn apart, and individual destinies were sealed with chilling indifference. Viking traders, especially those known as the Russ, who operated extensively in Eastern Europe, ingeniously used the vast, intricate network of Russian rivers as a slaving superhighway. These waterways, which wound their way through dense forests and sprawling plains, provided an efficient conduit for their human cargo. They traveled far and wide, seizing captives from Slavic tribes, Baltic communities, and other vulnerable populations, moving them with ruthless efficiency along these watery paths towards the lucrative markets in the east. These river routes were arteries of commerce, but they flowed with human misery. These captives, a significant number of them, women and children, were funneled relentlessly all the way to the wealthy and powerful Byzantine and Arab empires. These empires had an insatiable and continuous demand for enslaved people to serve as domestic workers, soldiers, laborers, and concubines. The Vikings met that demand with cold, calculated ruthlessness and remarkable efficiency, transforming human beings into commodities for profit. It was a vast, international enterprise, built entirely on forced labor and human suffering, connecting distant parts of the globe through a chain of exploitation. The undeniable proof of this extensive and brutal trade is literally buried in the ground today, waiting for us to uncover it. Archaeologists, digging through ancient Viking settlements, have unearthed mountains of Arab silver coins, dirhams, in Viking lands. These countless coins represent tangible evidence, the direct payment for the human cargo that flowed east, along the rivers and across the seas. Each coin, shining still after centuries, whispers a silent, tragic story of a life sold, a family shattered, and a journey into unimaginable hardship. They are not just artifacts, they are silent witnesses to a dark history. At these busy and dehumanizing slave markets, a shocking and deeply disturbing scene was witnessed and meticulously recorded by an Arab diplomat named Ibn Fadlan, whose writings provide a rare, first-hand glimpse into this brutal world. He described seeing Viking traders publicly performing sexual acts with enslaved women, not in some private hidden corner, but openly, for all to see. This was not a private matter, nor a secret shame. It was a brazen, public spectacle. It was a brutal, humiliating, and deeply calculated sales tactic designed to serve a chilling purpose. It was a clear, unambiguous demonstration of absolute ownership, showing potential buyers that the thralls were completely and utterly under the control of their masters, their bodies and wills entirely subjugated. It was the ultimate stripping away of humanity, a public act of degradation meant to break the spirit and diminish the perceived value of the individual to anything more than an object for sale. The message was clear. These women had no rights, no autonomy, and no dignity left to protect. Imagine the profound horror and despair of these women, forced to endure such public degradation, their bodies made into spectacles, their spirits crushed under the weight of such dehumanizing acts. This act was not just physical abuse, it was a potent psychological weapon, specifically designed to shatter their sense of self, to break their will, and to erase the last shreds of personal dignity they might have clung to. It was a deliberate, vicious act, meant to ensure their absolute submission, preparing them for a life where their bodies were not their own, but merely tools for their owners. What time are you watching this video? Is it morning, afternoon, or late at night? Drop a comment below and let me know. I find it absolutely incredible, almost magical, that we, across different continents and time zones, are exploring these ancient, often painful stories together, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past and our collective desire to understand the hidden truths of history. Your presence here, right now, helps bring these stories into the light. For the vast majority of thralls, their stolen lives became an endless, grueling cycle of backbreaking labor. Their days stretched out into an unforgiving eternity, filled with relentless toil. They spent countless hours grinding grain for the daily bread, a repetitive and physically draining task that left their muscles aching and their hands calloused. They hauled heavy buckets of water from deep wells, often over long distances, their backs bent under the burden. They tended to livestock in harsh, unforgiving conditions, enduring biting winds and freezing temperatures. Their work was constant, arduous, and never truly ended. There was always another task, another chore, another demand on their already exhausted bodies. A huge and particularly demanding part of their toil was the laborious process of making cloth. This crucial industry formed the very backbone of the Norse economy, providing essential goods for survival and trade. From the initial shearing of sheep, through the tedious processes of cleaning and carding the wool, to the meticulous and slow spinning of fibers into thread, and finally, the intricate, time-consuming weaving of fabric on looms. This work was slow, incredibly difficult, and utterly constant. It provided vital clothing, durable sails for the longships, and other essential textiles, all produced through the relentless, unpaid labor of thralls. Their bodies carried the silent, indelible marks of this brutal life. Their backs became permanently bent from years of stooping and carrying heavy loads. Their hands, once perhaps soft and nimble, grew gnarled, scarred, and constantly aching from the repetitive, harsh labor. Their entire beings bore the physical testament to a life of ceaseless hardship, malnutrition, and exhaustion. Their suffering was rarely spoken of in the sagas or the histories, but it was deeply etched into their very bones, their muscles, and their weary souls, a silent, enduring testament to their unacknowledged sacrifices. A thrall's body was, in the eyes of Viking law and society, considered her owner's absolute property. It could be used as he pleased, without her consent, without any consideration for her feelings, and certainly without any legal repercussions. This complete lack of bodily autonomy made many enslaved women horrifyingly vulnerable to sexual exploitation, a pervasive and tragic reality of their existence. They had no right to refuse, no means of protection, and no one to whom they could appeal for justice. Many women, especially those deemed desirable or useful for procreation, became frill, a term often translated as concubine or secondary wife, while some, in rare cases, may have found a small, precarious amount of security or perhaps even a degree of favor in this position. It was still a life utterly devoid of freedom or true choice. Their bodies were still not their own. Their status was entirely dependent on the whim of their owner. They were still property, bound by the chains of ownership, albeit sometimes gilded ones. Any children born from these coerced unions were automatically and irrevocably born into slavery. This ensured that the brutal system continued without interruption, creating new generations of thralls, perpetuating the cycle of ownership, forced labor, and exploitation. The children, innocent victims of a cruel system, inherited their mother's lack of freedom, destined to live the same life of servitude from birth, with virtually no hope of escape. The lineage of slavery was thus secured, generation after generation. This widespread practice was not a hidden shame or a dark secret relegated to the fringes of Viking society. On the contrary, it was a recognized, openly accepted, and deeply embedded part of their social structure, a clear and undeniable demonstration of the owner's power, wealth, and elevated status. The more thralls, purely female thralls, an individual possessed, the more prestige they commanded. The children of thralls had absolutely no way out, no legal recourse, and no escape from their inherited fate. They were simply additions to the master's chattel. In Iceland, a land often romanticized as a bastion of Norse freedom and exploration, modern genetic studies have revealed something truly shocking, heartbreaking, and historically profound. While the overwhelming majority of male ancestors of the modern Icelandic population have been traced back to Norse origins, the vast majority of female ancestors were found to be Gaelic. This means they predominantly came from the shores of Ireland and Scotland, lands frequently subjected to Viking raids. This striking genetic evidence tells a silent, tragic, yet incredibly powerful story that history books often omit or gloss over. These founding mothers of Iceland were, in most cases, not willing immigrants seeking new opportunities alongside their male counterparts. Instead, they were brought there in chains, stripped violently from their homes, torn from their families, and forced to endure a new life of servitude in a foreign land. Their DNA, carried through centuries, is a silent scream from history, a genetic testament to the brutal realities of the Viking Age. It is an echo of their pain, preserved in the very fabric of the nation. It reminds us, with stark clarity, that the ancestry of a nation, the very roots of its people, can sometimes hide stories of profound violence, coercion, and injustice. The strong Viking men who settled Iceland, carving out a new society in a harsh landscape, very often brought their women by force, a brutal and undeniable truth preserved in the very genes of the population, waiting for science to finally bring it to light. It is a powerful counter-narrative to the tales of bold exploration, revealing the hidden cost of empire. Would you have dared to resist in such a world, facing such overwhelming power and such brutal consequences? Yes or no? Take a moment to tell me your thoughts in the comments below. It's incredibly difficult to imagine the immense courage, the sheer defiance, and the desperate hope it would take to even contemplate resisting such an overwhelming, dehumanizing system, where your very life was not your own. Your thoughts help us connect with these challenging aspects of history. While the vast majority of thralls faced an unending life of relentless labor and severe exploitation, a vanishingly small number of high-born women, or those from particularly influential families, might, if they were incredibly lucky, be ransomed. Their families, if wealthy and powerful enough to command significant resources, could pay an exorbitant price, often a king's ransom in silver, goods, or even other thralls, to buy back their freedom, a small glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak landscape. But these cases were exceedingly rare, a privilege almost unheard of for the common thrall. But for countless others, the end of their suffering was far darker, far more brutal, and chillingly definitive. Some became victims of human sacrifice, a chilling and horrific practice that offered a terrifying and ultimate end to their suffering, not for profit, but for ritualistic purposes. Their lives were not just taken, they were consecrated to dark gods or used to serve the deceased in the afterlife, a final horrifying act of exploitation. The same astute Arab diplomat, Ibn Fadlan, who so vividly witnessed and recorded the public humiliation of enslaved women, also provided a horrifyingly detailed account of a ship burial ceremony among the Rus Vikings he encountered. This account, grim and graphic, offers an unprecedented and horrifying glimpse into the ultimate ritualistic sacrifice of Som, a thralls, revealing the extreme depths of their master's power and indifference. It's a testament to the absolute expendability of a thrall's life. In this deeply disturbing ritual, a female thrall was ostensibly forced to volunteer to die with her master, to accompany him into the afterlife. Her choice, however, was heavily influenced by powerful drugs and copious amounts of alcohol, administered to cloud her judgment and diminish her will, effectively rendering her consent meaningless. Before the final gruesome act, she was sexually exploited by the men of the tribe, a final act of desecration and power before her life was extinguished. It was a calculated, ritualistic humiliation, removing any last vestige of her autonomy. Then, at the climax of the ceremony, as her master's ship was being prepared for its fiery journey, she was ritually strangled, ropes tightened around her throat by several men. But before she could die completely, while still gasping for breath, an old woman, a terrifying figure, known chillingly as the Angel of Death, stepped forward. With a sharp, purposeful blade, she stabbed the thrall repeatedly and savagely between the ribs, ensuring a quick, brutal end. Her screams, if any managed to escape her dying throat, were likely drowned out by the shouts, chants, and rhythmic drums of the barbaric ceremony, lost in the chaotic final moments. This horrifying and public ritual served a chilling and profound purpose beyond merely sending the master to the afterlife. With a companion, it sent a terrifying and unequivocal message to all other enslaved girls and women watching. It showed them, with visceral brutality, the absolute and unchallenged power their masters held over their very lives. It served as a stark, gruesome deterrent, preventing any thoughts of escape, rebellion, or even the smallest act of defiance. Death, in its most horrifying form, awaited those who were deemed disposable, a fate easily met at the whim of their owners. Archaeological findings from numerous high-status graves across the Viking Age undeniably confirm these grim and disturbing accounts of human sacrifice. Many of these elaborately prepared burial sites show the remains of high-status individuals interred alongside lower-status people, very often young women. These accompanying burials are widely believed by archaeologists and historians to be those of sacrificed thralls, their lives taken to serve their masters in the afterlife. These buried bodies, silent for centuries, yet incredibly eloquent in their testimony, sometimes found with clear marks of violence, severed heads, broken bones, or signs of strangulation, tell a silent but powerful and utterly devastating story. Their bones are not just ancient remains. They are a testament to ultimate horror, a chilling display of power, and a stark reminder of human cruelty. They speak of lives ended abruptly, brutally, and completely without choice, their existence snuffed out to satisfy ritual or status. Their graves are not just burial sites in the traditional sense. They are profound historical documents, etched in earth and bone, revealing the dark customs and brutal practices of a society that saw certain human lives as entirely expendable, mere accessories to the powerful. The earth itself holds these dark secrets, preserving them for centuries, patiently waiting for us to uncover them, to listen to their silent screams, and to finally give voice to the forgotten victims of the Viking Age. In Viking society, the ownership of thralls was not just common. It was a basic and absolutely essential sign of status, power, and accumulated wealth. It was a tangible metric of a person standing within the community. The more enslaved people a person owned, whether for labor, prestige, or sexual purposes, the more respect, influence, and authority they commanded. It was a fundamental, deeply ingrained part of their social fabric, a visible display of their ability to dominate and exploit others. The great Viking stories, the epic sagas that enthrall us with tales of heroes and adventures, simply describe slavery as a normal, unquestioned fact of life. Within these texts, there is little to no moral debate, no condemnation, and virtually no discussion of the ethics of the practice. It was simply presented as how things were, an inherent and accepted part of their world. Much like farming or fishing, the suffering of the thralls was either ignored or implicitly understood as part of their natural place in the rigid social order. They built an entire empire, expanded their influence across vast distances from the North Atlantic to the Black Sea, and accumulated immense wealth and prestige, all without ever truly questioning the brutal, dehumanizing cost in human lives. The profound suffering of countless thralls was largely ignored, seen as an acceptable, even necessary price for power, prosperity, and societal advancement. Their grand achievements were built on a foundation of stolen lives and broken bodies, a truth often omitted from romanticized narratives. Which other hidden, uncomfortable truth about an ancient civilization or historical period should we explore next? Drop your ideas in the comments below. Your suggestions are incredibly valuable. They help us decide which untold stories, which marginalized voices, and which difficult realities we should bring to light on this channel. Let's continue to challenge conventional narratives together. The great Viking voyages, their legendary wealth, their impressive longhouses, and the formidable power of their chiefs, much of it, indeed most of it, was financed, sustained, and built upon the stolen lives, the tireless labor, and the broken bodies of countless women, men, and children. This uncomfortable, yet undeniable truth is very often deliberately left out of the romantic stories, the epic movies, and the popular historical portrayals we hear and see today. It's a carefully curated omission. The popular romantic image of the Viking as a noble adventurer, a bold explorer, or a fierce, honorable warrior driven by a strong moral code is in many fundamental ways a carefully constructed fiction. It's a sanitized, softened version of history, consciously or unconsciously built to overlook this dark, deeply uncomfortable, and too often forgotten truth of widespread human exploitation, and systematic cruelty. It's time to confront the full spectrum of their legacy. If this deeply unsettling history is chilling you to the bone, if it has opened your eyes to a new facet of the past, please help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Your support is absolutely vital to unlock more untold stories, to continue exposing the hidden realities of the past, and to ensure these forgotten voices are finally heard. Join our growing community of history enthusiasts and hit that subscribe button now. Let's make sure these truths are never buried again. This was not just a dark, isolated chapter in history. It was the brutal engine, the very driving force that powered a powerful, expansive, and influential empire. The lives of countless individuals were sacrificed, their dignity stripped away, their hopes extinguished, all to build a world that is, ironically, often remembered only for its grandeur, its exploration, and its supposed might. We must remember the price. This story shocked you if it challenged your preconceived notions and truly changed your view of the Viking Age. Please help me reach 1,000 subscribers by subscribing to this channel right now. And please tell me in the comments which other hidden truth of ancient history, which other untold story you want to see uncovered next. Your engagement fuels this important work. Thank you for joining me on this challenging yet vital journey into the shadows of the past. Your curiosity, your willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, and your support help us ensure that these vital, though often painful stories are never truly forgotten, and that the voices of the past, particularly the silenced ones, can finally be heard